Beth, how are you? How long has it been?
I was trying to work it out actually, because I remember at Warner Goodman when you joined Move With Us and you started ringing through for progress reports, and that must have been 2003, maybe four.
Probably a long time ago. Yeah, a long time ago. And we've done all sorts of things since then, and we're still
My word,
making up
yeah.
as we go along.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
mean,
yeah. Keep
yeah, yeah,
bumping into each other
absolutely.
across the spectrum.
I was I tried to get in contact with someone on LinkedIn only yesterday to say, look, we really should catch up and do more things together. And I looked at our last time we'd actually chatted on LinkedIn. It's a decade this August.
It is terrifying, isn't it? And
Where
and
does the time go?
it just flies by because we're having so much fun trying to improve the home moving process.
Well, yeah, and on that front, I have to say, I mean, just how many caps can one lady wear? I mean, I know my wife has lots of shoes, but seriously, co-chair Home Buying and Selling Group, you're director of the Conveyancing Association, director of delivery, you've got De Montjoy Consulting Limited still going. I mean, do you ever find time to eat, breathe, sleep? What's
No,
going
no,
on?
you've missed out the Digital Property Market Steering Group
DPMS, of course, yes,
and
absolutely. I've
the
got a
Digital
graphic for that.
Property Information Protocol, which apparently I'm lead on. How ridiculous is that? Can you
Well,
believe it?
I looked at the DPMSG infographic you put on LinkedIn the other day to look at
What,
your
the tube map?
objectives. Your objectives, and I thought
Okay. Did you see the tube map? Because I made that. Can you believe
that's.
it?
I can imagine it's impressive and would mess with anybody's head, but
But it
it
would
just.
share it with you if you like.
Please do. Do you ever worry though? Again, I was on a podcast the other week, and it's amazing how much we talk about, how much we try and drive change or get involved or make suggestions that everyone agrees with, but no one's willing to actually take that leap of faith and actually help push. Everyone's happy just to sit in the car complaining it's not going anywhere. And there's only a few people actually on the corner of the vehicle trying to push it up the hill. And I just wonder why. Why is that?
Well, this was the fun thing that we did with the Digital Property Market Steering Group. We did a removing barriers session where we reached out to find out what the problem was. And it is fear of the unknown and it is belief in something that doesn't exist. So the reason that most people don't want to be involved is usually because of fear of liability. And what really people I don't think realize is that actually if you get all of the information up front and all of the material information, the liability doesn't change. You're always going to be liable if you do your job wrong, but the risk plummets because you've got multiple people reviewing the information. You've ensured that the buyer knows about the property before they put their offer in. So they're less likely to complain. They're more likely to proceed and take a calculated risk. The problem is once they've had their offer accepted, at that point, loss aversion kicks in. And so they just see everything as a challenge. But at the end of the day, they then find that actually this is going to really muck them about. And so that's the point at which they put in complaints. But actually, when you look at the number of negligence claims against lawyers or against surveyors, the number's really, really tiny. And particularly when you compare it to the number of complaints from consumers to national trading standards, obviously it would be the Competition and Markets Authority now. Although they don't need it to be a complaint, they can just crack on in and fine you anyway. So, that's really beefing it up. But yeah, so this is why. And we feel this sort of comfort in the status quo. And there's a lot of misunderstanding as well. And I went through and tried to create a Mythbuster document to help people realize actually what they could do. So, for example, the conveyancing quality scheme references the TA forms, but it also confirms that you've got to act to your client's instructions or in the client's best interest. So if you do get a form that completes all of the information and certainly the BASB and the PIQ look not only to provide the TA6 information, but also the responses to the additional inquiries that would come after the information provided in the TA6, because where they're digital, the PIQ, well, certainly the BASB is, it then can say, okay, well, you've answered this to this question, so we know that we've got to ask the next question. So it's absolutely fine for lawyers to accept that because it's acting in the best interest of the client. And if their client instructs them to use it, then all good. The other thing to note is that the Law Society or Conveyancing Quality Scheme are never going to want to enforce somebody not using the TA6 unless it's the client detriment, and that would come under regulatory elements. Because, of course, if they do it, it would be a regulation, and that then means they'd have to pass CQS to the Solicitors Regulatory Authority. and all the money with the training that goes with it. This
Indeed.
isn't going out public, is it, Danielle?
No. This is,
No.
we'll keep this really quiet. Yeah. We're not going to share this with anybody. This is just
Well,
you and me. We're
no.
just having a chat. We're just
the
having a
the
catch up. I haven't
point
pressed record at all.
the point is that that none of this is in competition with the Law Society. We have been working with them, and Mark Evans, oh my God, so exciting that we do have a property professional coming up as the president of the Law Society. Last time that happened was
18.
Smithers. God, what was his first name? He was fantastic though, and because Jonathan Smithers, that was
Okay.
it.
Yeah.
And because he came from a property background, he helped us get the leasehold property inquiries out there, because the Law Society were nervous about it. But because he knew how much difference it would make, he absolutely pushed it forward, which was brilliant. So if Mark Evans wants to take his place in history, he could perhaps help with the digitisation of the TA forms and also making sure that they comply with the Open Property Data Standard and the Property Data Trust Framework, which then means that it's digitised and that information can be sucked into all of the other systems. And also, one of the other things that we're looking to do in the Digital Property Market Steering Group is say, okay, well, if you've got this answer, does that mean it's material information or not? Is it an issue with the property? And then if it is an issue, who should advise the consumer on it? So, for example, with onerous lease terms like ground rent, escalating ground rent, obviously the conveyancer will advise the buyer on the legal aspects, but then you've got the financial advisor advising on affordability. And then you've also got the mortgage advisor advising on which lender will lend. So what we want to do is use the digital output from those web forms to basically push the consumer down the right advice so that the conveyancer knows that they absolutely aren't expected to advise on something that they have no expertise in, like environmental matters or asbestos.
Everything that looks like something that's better. And it's sort of typified by little changes that maybe I'm just too simple a person. I see things in a very simple way. Someone says to a law firm, you need to be reporting on climate change. I immediately think, well, order the right form that reports on climate change. Ask the supplier to say, okay, can you just give me a list of all the outcomes mean so that I can put that into my system? And then when I get the report, I go, right, which one is it? Oh, it's that. And that's what I should be saying to my client. Better still, as well, share the report with your client. You have given them a really consumer friendly environmental report that shows all about climate change. They're informed. But everyone seems to fight it. I'm not an expert in that. You don't have to be an expert in that. Why do you think you have to be an expert in everything? Just surround yourself with the right products and things and drive the ship and make sure your client's well informed. But instead of finding the solution, everyone seems to be in this mindset of let's just fight it. Let's just stand on a soapbox and shout about all the reasons why we're being put upon too much. How is that ever going to change?
Well, the point is that what we need to do is actually take these things out of the conveyancer's hands. Not that I'm trying to reduce the amount of work they have to do, but what I'm saying is that if we get the material information delivered correctly, then that means that all of that information will be gathered up front when the property goes on the market. Now, it would be great to ensure that the conveyancer is instructed at that point as well to review all the legal issues and to advise the client on those things that they do have the expertise. And yes, they could order the reports, but of course, as you say, they're not going to be able to give the advice on it. But what we know from previous things, like when environmental searches came out, and also with the local searches, I've certainly done work for some search companies where we identified what the consumer needed to know, so what the material information in those searches was, and then created a separate consumer focused report and alongside the conveyancer report. Because as a conveyancer, I know if I'm looking at a local search, out of the 360 questions or however many there are, I'm only looking for one yes, and the rest of them I want to be no. The yes is a highway publicly maintained. Yes, happy days. As long as everything else is no, that's fine. But if I gave that to a home buyer, what would they be able to do with it? So I think this is the point. If all of the information is obtained upfront and then reviewed to identify which is the material information that actually applies to that property, then the conveyancer doesn't need to get involved with climate change. I mean, we're not Nostradamus. We can't tell what's going to happen tomorrow. I mean, obviously, if reform gets in, they're getting rid of net zero. God, what's going to happen then? But we'll park that one. Does Nigel Farage listen to this? Anyway,
No.
So I think I'm going to piss
He
off.
got really gobby on my last post, so now he's banned.
So, no, the point is that what we can do is ensure that the consumer is provided with the information that they do need. But what we also need to make sure is that we're not providing them with a load of documents and a load of disclaimers telling them all the things that they might want to know but they don't need to know, kind of stuff. So, I've had clients asking me what a tree preservation order is and does it matter if there's no smoke control order zone. It's like, no, it just doesn't apply to you. But they actually read the report at least, so that's good.
Wow, that is good. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
again, it comes down to loss aversion. And when they're looking for a property, they're all excited. It's like property porn. They can't get enough information about it. It's fabulous. So that is the time to tell them the things that do impact them. Now, obviously, material information is just for the average consumer's
Mm.
requirements. So what we need to be doing is ensuring that the consumer knows that they've got to specify if they want something special. So if they've got intended use and enjoyment that isn't the average. So if they've got a white van they want to park on the property, or if they want to run a business from there or let it out, then we need to make sure that we pick those bits up and advise them on the information and what it means to them and their plans. But at the end of the day, because they've already had the material information to start with, then it means that they've been able to consume that before it's become all about getting their mortgage through and ensuring that they exchange contracts as quickly as
Oh, yeah,
possible.
totally agree. And I hear a lot of chats with conveyancers online that say, "Oh, they don't need to know this stuff. They won't understand this stuff. Why do they want to get involved with this stuff?" So, well, let them decide. It's not down to you as to what they should or shouldn't want to find out or be absorbing. But I think it's vital that consumers should know what they're letting themselves in for. But importantly, we're now working with more and more estate agents now to say, "Look, seriously, guys, can you please stop getting worried about brand damage? Can you stop beating your chests about being so amazing at selling a property?" Which isn't selling a property. You've match made it. Someone's gone, "I could see myself living there." The hard work is starting when it hits the conveyancer. But you guys are really bad at preparing properties for sale. No one's talking enough about the material information or getting people legally prepared, or better still, instructing and working with a brilliant conveyancer up your high street to get all your sellers sale ready and tackling the issues before you even start the marketing. So we're trying to get more agents to think really seriously about that. And if you want your sales pipeline to go through quicker, guess what you can do? Behave like it's going to auction and get it sale ready, and then do all your marketing and find a buyer, and then effectively the cost goes down. All the answers are there, all the information's there. You can just transact and make sure you're selling it to a buyer that's also jumped through all the hoops you expect to jump through. But the market seems to still be, it's a conveyancer's problem. I'm going to do the fun bit and I'm not going to get involved with the rest. And that's what we've got to change. More conveyancers, I think, need to also think about getting back to the grassroots relationships we had decades ago, where they knew their agents and they had an interest in going and winning local work and not being relied upon being fed by some third party with a bit of glittery tech that's going to feed them. Okay, we've got a bit of glittery tech and we will feed them, but it's on their terms. It's not like the panel manager relationship. But there's so much gold dust up and down your high streets, and no one seems to be going out and spending the time to meet with the agents and building those really vital relationships and saying, okay, how can we together make something magical here to make the process better? What can I do for you? What can you do for me? And start to break down that constant infighting of them and us, which I'm sick of. We deal with a lot with our consumers and our home movers, and they are always stuck in the middle, looking one way at someone screaming, looking another way at someone getting frustrated and thinking, is anyone thinking about me in all this? There's so much going on. I don't know what's happening, but surely this is about me, right? And it doesn't seem to be.
My God, there's so much we can unpack from your little rant there. How is
There's
your
so much that needs
soapbox,
to
by the way?
unpack. Oh yeah, it's getting flattened. It's well worn, but yes,
Okay,
sorry about
so
that.
the good news is with the Digital Property Market Steering Group, what we did is we got into the room the 7 key sectors in the home moving process. So we got the estate agents, the conveyancers, the lenders, the mortgage intermediary, the valuers, the surveyors, and the data providers. And we got each of them to have a look through and understand what data they needed in the process,
Mm.
what were the benefits of getting it at the earliest possible time, and what were the laws that required them to do it or how they were to do it. And of course, I've worked across lots of industry. I started as an estate agent, then became a high street conveyancer, then went on to volume conveyancing, became a case management workflow programmer, then left to become a freelance consultant when the financial crisis hit. So ended up working for search companies, for domestic energy assessors, double glazing salesmen, mortgage advisors, the lot. So what I knew from working with all of those and working across their computer systems, I understood that everybody needs the same data, but it's just we're so siloed, we don't see that. So when we then got everybody sat around the table, it became clear and they went, oh yeah, actually we all need the same stuff. And so that's when we created a spreadsheet and I got everybody to identify what data sets they needed. And that then enabled them to create a web page. And so we've now got the DPIP web pages, that's the Digital Property Information Protocol, and for each sector. So that's gone through phase 1 and we're just getting the consultation on that. But it's got a big tick so far from everybody. A few amends need to be done just to change the wording, but it looks really basic. If you're a conveyancer looking at it, you go, well, obviously I know this, but it's not for you. It's for the other sectors to understand. And then the next thing in phase 2 is the consumer focused one. So what we want to do is ensure that the consumer knows who does what when and what they can do to help and improve it and who they should be reaching out to get advice on all of these elements. So that will be coming hopefully later on this year, as will updates to the how to buy and how to sell guides. Obviously, we've got to get the guidance refreshed for the material information because that moved from National Trading Standards Enforcement through to Competition and Markets Authority. So we're checking in with them. I've got a meeting with them next week to have a chat through and see if they're going to be producing their own guidance. They've got generic guidance at the moment, which is very much you have to provide the information material to the average consumer, whether or not you think it is relevant to them. It's like, what? Okay. So, that's as much guidance as they're giving. But what we want to do in the Home Buying and Selling Council is say to them, look, if you're not going to do something property specific, how about we take, because I was on the steering committee with the National Trading Standards guidance guys. And so we take that, we go out to the compliance of all of the estate agents, conveyancers, surveyors, valuers, everybody, and just make sure that we tweak it so that it is identifiable to everybody involved who needs to do what and who has that legal obligation.
Now, unless I missed something, I didn't hear in your list of people involved, insurance companies, the PII suppliers. Are they involved?
Well, they certainly, in the Digital Property Market Steering Group, they're in phase 2, as are property managers, new build, and all the ones that we touch with.
They do seem to be a reason for a barrier existing with lots of things. For example, again, I had a conversation with an agent the other day, and they were talking about IDAMLs and the fact that there is this thing called Safe Harbour Standard, and they should be able to order it, and then they should be able to, through the tech, share that with other people in the food chain. So it goes to the broker, it goes to the conveyancer. And of course, most conveyancers turn around and go, I need to do it myself because I've been told I've got to do it myself. Now, I'm not convinced about that, and I'm wondering where they're hearing that from, or whether they just haven't read the fact that they can accept a safe harbour standard from a source, even if they haven't ordered it themselves.
So there's a few things to note there. One, safe harbour standard requires you to have a passport with a chip and an NFU reader. So that's not necessarily easy. Also, it doesn't actually hit the Confidence Plus Plus standard required by lenders. So if we just park safe harbour for a moment and talk about digital ID. So digital ID is coming through with the data ID and attributes, no, data usage and attributes a bill, and that should become an act, so legislation, by the end of spring, which of course is July. End of July. So fingers crossed that when that comes through, that will then enable that verified certificate to be shared. And that will confirm the attributes of the consumer and their identity in relation to that. So attributes, might be so that they can use that certification when they go to an off license because it confirms that they're over 18 or whatever. So we've got that coming down the track. Once that comes down the track, things become a little bit easier. Of course, under the latest money laundering directive in there, it does say that you can accept ID from an agent, not an estate agent, an agent, a third party who has done it. They must know that you're going to use it and consent to you using it. And they must confirm that if you're audited, you're able to get from them the information that they've received. Now, the really good news is the Land Registry have got onto this, and they recognise that with the digital ID coming down the track now, need to ensure that there is nothing there to block them. So we've got UK Finance updating the lender handbook. They're digitising it and hoping to have that out in October. And within that, there will be the opportunity for the lender to state whether they accept digital ID or not. Now, at the Conveyancing Association, we're lobbying them to say, well, that should be in part one. Everybody should accept digital ID, because the PII insurers have said, well, certainly Edward Don from Howdens has said, if we get digital ID, it will reduce your premiums by, I mean, he says 60%, but it is a ridiculously large number. And the reason for that is in Norway, where they use digital ID, they reduced fraud by 1,000%. So it's now 0.0001 cases. Now, if you think how much your premium is and what happens if you get caught with a seller impersonation fraud and you lose £1.2 million, of course the insurers need to get that back from somewhere. And the trouble is, it's not just you that is going to be impacted with your premiums, it's the whole industry. On top of that, our industry gets lumped in with the marine industry, and of course they had all of that problem with the blocking of the Suez Canal and those sort of things. So, that is why the premiums and the costs do go up. But once we've got digital ID, we can reduce that. Now, the other thing to note is Land Registry have also said that they will be updating their ID forms 1 to 5, so that it doesn't just point to list A and list B, because who wants to rely on something that's been certified by someone you don't know who they are or whether they've got any qualification, and that will give you the option to use digital ID. So everything, from UK Finance Handbook, whether it is part 1 or part 2, plus the Land Registry now having that, is all saying, yes, you can accept digital ID, so long as it's a digital ID provider that ticks the box. Okay, how do I find out if they tick the box? Well, you've got an EIDAS level and you get the qualified ID providers. I think they're called trust qualified, and all you have to do is Google that, and you can identify which one of them out there are. So, for example, Third Fort already ticked that box, and there are plenty of other ones too, but I can't remember the names. I'm very sorry. Credas.
Yeah, there are a number of them. Yeah, that's brilliant. I don't need to ask you questions. You just keep going, don't you?
There's just so much to tell you, Daniel. I'm not seeing you for so long.
Perhaps this session is not the unplugged. It should be called Beth Plugged In. This is amazing.
I'm just downloading my brain.
Yeah, you have. Yeah, amazing. So what else have you got in the pipeline? What are you working on? What's the biggest frustration? If you had a magic wand, what have you got to fix?
If I had a magic wand, would be, just as you say, actually, is to enable people to access all of this data and to stop sort of blocking it. So what we're looking at is actually, how can we make this so much easier? Yes, of course, material information and getting all that information available up front will make a huge difference. But the other thing you've got to think about, I mean, certainly when I was an estate agent, we had a dead file. Yeah. And so, when we saw a property coming on the market that we'd sold before, we'd go and knock on the door and say, well, I know it's leasehold and I know you've probably got this many years left. And because it was before the Property Misdescription Act, you could put all of the really useful information about amount, ground rent, service charges, which you couldn't do when the Property Misdescription Act came in. But anyway, that's gone now. Happy days. So, and certainly as a conveyancer, I could answer all the additional inquiries because I just looked through the deeds packet. It was all there. So what we want to do is enable that to happen again. Yeah. So we're looking at how that can be. So, for example, with the digital property logbook companies, what they're looking to do is to gather all of the information relating to the property and then allocate it to the UPRN, so the unique property reference number for that property, so that there is only one digital property logbook per UPRN, so that we don't have any fraud going on. Now, that can be the seller information. So things like, I don't know, just even in the instructions for their cooker, or if they've got one of the smart devices, smart home devices, like for mine, I'd have to have some the instructions for how to use the lights that will switch on when you ask Alexa to turn them on and those sort of things. So they can have all of that in there, but then also we need to be able to have the public data made digital so that can pre-populate those things. So that might sit in a digital property logbook, or it might be the government have something similar to, if you try and Google to see about your MOT online, it will tell you that whether or not there's an MOT, and it will tell you what the advisories were.
Mm.
Perhaps government could do that sort of thing, or in other industries, there's something called Enrich My Care in the NHS, and
Mhm.
on there, doctors, consultants, physiotherapists, the parent and the child can all identify what's going on where their child is a patient of that particular NHS trust. So that's kind of doing exactly the same thing. If you replace NHS with HM Land Registry and then put in all of the private and public sector data, that's exactly what needs to be delivered. So it's not just for the home buying and selling, it's for the life cycle of the property. So if you want to remortgage, to retrofit, to let the property, to extend or alter the property, you can immediately go to find out the information that you need, and it will take you to those things. Because of course, people have different personality types. So for some people, just thinking, yeah, I'll probably have to pay capital gains tax, that's enough for them. But for other people, they want to actually dig into it and see what this means, and they want to click all the way through. And so
Mhm.
with the Digital Property Market Steering Group, where we've done the DPIP, what we're looking to do is enable people to literally click through till they get to the last bit of information if they want to, or just have that overview to see what's going to impact them, so that they've got it in their head to think about later.
Quick question, personal to me, obviously. Well, not personal to me, our business. The lifespan of a search from a
Hmm.
lender's point of view, that really gets my goat. So is that ever going to change? We know that transactions are taking longer, and I'd love to see them being a lot shorter. However, a refresh of a search pack, what really changes? The date?
I'm so glad you say that. But also, what we need to think about is that the local authority data goes much wider than the CON 29. And certainly, my contacts at the local authority that deal with public open space, they're absolutely furious that buyers, when they buy properties, aren't told that there's a right of way, a public right of way that goes across their back garden. So they get encroachment or them blocking it because the conveyancer didn't do a CON 29O, they only did a CON 29R. So what happens is the local authority then has to spend a whole load of money on legals to try and resolve this for the rest of the public.
Mhm.
And of course, for the buyer, they didn't know anything about it. So I think what we should really be doing is saying to local authorities, tell us what material information is relevant to this property in everything that you hold, whether it's bin collection or whether it is a financial charge on the property or, whatever. But at the moment, we're sort of limited by the CON 29, the choice of a CON 29R or O, which, of course, if the seller's going to be doing them up front for the material information, well, they're going to spend as little money as possible. So it will continue to inflate this issue. Don't forget, local authorities are not given any money to support this. Any money they do get goes off to fund either their salary or other departments. When you look at the budgets for local authority, they have gone massively over on adult social care. So I think Worcester is something like £30 million over, or no, 300 million, sorry, over budget on the adult social care. So any money they get in is going to be looking to block that gap, really.
So let's say sellers packs happen and sellers are saying, okay, I'll order a local authority search, environmental, drainage and water, that's great, but it takes 5 months to sell their property. Okay, the answers for the material information are there and they've satisfied the requirements of providing information for the surveyor or sending something out rudimentary with the contract with their conveyancer for the buyer to have a look at, but the buyer's still in a position where they need to get their own set of searches, which seems to me absolutely crazy.
No, that and that the really good news here is that 9 out of 10 transactions go through within 6 months from listing. So if the market is really, really busy and the conveyancer is really, really busy, the properties sell faster, but the conveyancing takes a little bit longer. If the market's really slow, then the properties take longer to sell, but the conveyancers aren't so busy, so the transactions go through faster. So on average, it's 9 out of 10, and most search companies will refresh anyway. Now, the reason they can refresh, of course, is because of the digitalisation the local authorities are doing with land registry from the local land charges. And there is a pilot planned by MHCLG to look to see what else they could digitise in the CON 29 data. So I think they're starting with highways and I think with buildings regulations to see if they can make that accessible. So once you get to that, then you get the real-time data. But as you say, Daniel, what changes? I mean, I live in a listed building. Is it ever not going to be listed? No, it's listed. It doesn't change. And if it was going to be listed, then there would be an application that goes in first, and I wouldn't apply to get my property listed that I'm selling.
No. Why would
So
you be doing anything on your property that
no,
when it's on the market? If you're serious
no,
about selling, you go, right, tools down, we're selling. The local
exactly.
search will stand, and it won't really change.
Yeah. Now with HS2 and things like that was bringing in stuff that was outside of the seller's control, but they would have received a notice on anything that was impacting their property. Well, in the TA forms and the PIQ and all the other forms, it asks what notices have you received. So
Exactly.
the seller's conveyancer will always be saying, let me know if anything changes
Yeah.
and if anything gets updated. So theoretically, it would all be safe.
Yeah.
So yeah, I do tend to agree with you, but nobody's ever been able to produce for me the data to identify actually how often things do change. And that would be really interesting, but also how many things on average come up on a property, because I reckon there's probably only 2 or 3. And if we're only talking 2 or 3 things coming up on property, then the lenders can then identify what their lending policy would be for those things that do come up.
Yes, and maybe accept an indemnity.
Well, yeah, but then, we keep accepting these indemnities, but actually what does it do? It's not, for the
It's not
consumer, they
solving the
think
problem, is it?
that
Yeah.
their problem solved. But actually, if they've got a loft conversion and it's not safe in a fire, well, that doesn't change with an indemnity insurance policy, does it?
No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't at all. No. So yeah, interesting. I must admit, we've seen massive changes in timescales with the local authorities that have gone digital, and the turnaround is absolutely phenomenal. And they're even complaining and saying, "Why are you still saying it's 3 working days?" It's like, well, because occasionally we have to raise an additional inquiry and we've missed something or something. But yeah, on the whole, there's one that we had only the other day. It was literally 2 days from point of order map and getting, so it's back. It's like,
I remember in
brilliant,
Portsmouth, 45 minutes.
brilliant. Yeah,
It was just because it was just a computer talking to a computer.
yes.
And this is what I've always been pushing out with Endless and Land Data and saying, well, look, you had level 1, 2, and 3 on your licensing on whether the request could be sent initially by email and then whether they could respond by email and then whether in the back office everything was done electronically. Surely if that information is being typed in, then if they type it into the data standard, then that means they're digitizing their own data as they go. So that they should just be able to provide it to you in real time digitally. Well, the good news is that Land Data are now looking at what they should be doing to refresh what the way they work and the way Endless works, and identify how they can digitalize. So it looks like everybody's waking up to this now. But of course, you remember the LLC one. I mean, gosh, I think we're 10 years in on that, and it's due to be completed in 2027, I think. But it will be completed, whereas the registration of land in UK, I mean, that started in 1860, although the first one wasn't registered till 1862. So it took them 2 years to work out how to do it. We won't do anything
Things have always moved so quickly.
and so they're up to 83% now. But now they've identified that actually, if the tide's in, they're much higher. But when the tide goes out, there's more land, so they've not got that registered. No, all joking aside, they of course are not going to get things like the stuff owned by Network Rail or the stuff owned by the Crown registered easily, because who's bothered about it? Nobody really. But the point being, things are getting faster. So it's not going to be done overnight, is it, Daniel? But
No.
we know that it will, if we don't start somewhere, it's not going to happen at all.
Indeed. And the resistance to change, are we seeing that simply because firms that will make a difference or have the ability to drive change are just all at the coalface, all working, saying we can't possibly deal with change because we know this works and we'll just get through it, that they haven't got time to take breath to say, okay, what's going on out there?
Also, they
How's
don't
that
have a
actually going to be
chance.
implemented?
No, they don't have
I
a
feel
chance
for
to
them.
try it, do they? And that's the thing. Until you've actually tried it. So if you think when personal searches came in as regulated by COPSO and things like that, I only saw them through the work that I used to get from Move With Us. And so they would say, no, the searches have to be ordered through, I can't remember which company it was, but it has to be ordered through them. And then we're like, this is actually quite nice, because instead of going out to all the different local authorities and getting different search results back, I can now see the search result in exactly the same standard. I can train my staff what to look for and where to look for, and immediately see where the issues lie. And it wasn't until I was forced to try that I realized actually that's probably a little bit easier, and the turnover was much quicker, and so it improved the service for the consumer as well. And I think that is the problem. People don't have a chance to give it a go. So, to me, why conveyancers aren't out knocking on the estate agent's door saying, look, you need material information, just pass it to us, we can crack on and get that for you. Why then conveyancers aren't saying to their seller clients, look, I'll prepare the material information. That's the bronze standard of my service. Silver is I'll mention to you if there are any issues that would impact the average consumer. And the gold standard is you can tell me to crack on and fix it. But we should be charging for all of this work.
Oh,
It's just all
absolutely.
work
Yeah,
that
yeah,
we should be
yeah,
charging for.
yeah.
The difficulty is that certainly when I was working, well, we worked together, didn't we, for the
We did.
company that
Yeah.
did the onboarding and the
The Oak Leaf
quoting.
project. I know that. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And what we realized there was that actually you could increase the fees by hundreds of pounds and your conversion rate wouldn't change. But the only way we could get people to increase the fees was by saying, look, if you're busy, why don't you quote a higher fee, but then you'll have less work? And so we'd have a higher fee scale and a normal fee scale. And of course, conveyancers always feel busy. So they'd always quote the higher fee scale. And when they realized that the
Made no
conversion rate was
difference.
the same, made no difference, you could say, well, hang on, we better make that a normal fee scale and we'll put up a higher fee scale for when you're feeling busy. And then again, we went up again. And I think that's it. I think conveyancers are so worried. We're not really good on profit. It's vocational. We do it to help people.
Mm.
And so, when it actually comes to trying to increase fees, one, it doesn't feel morally right. We can just get this done. But also, we don't charge for extra work. So, as I say, in a transaction, if you identify that there's a problem with a lease, you're probably going to try and resolve it for your client and not charge them extra. Well,
Yep.
that's ridiculous. Why should the client with the perfect title have to pay the same as somebody with a nightmare title?
Yeah.
So I think being able to quote consumers up front. And the other thing is that the consumers don't shop around as much as we think they do. My son, when he was looking
Do you know
to
why? Do you know
get,
why though? It
well,
is so painful. The experience is horrific. You only need to speak to my team at Conveyancer Insights doing all the mystery shopping to understand just how horrific the experience is. You don't want to shop around. In fact, you're begging the first one to say, can we open a file? Yes, please.
that's the thing, he is an intelligent, high IQ lad, and he was told that the mortgage broker that he had to use was this one. They were going to charge him £800. And I'm like, hang on, my mortgage broker will do it for £100. And it's like, oh, okay then. And, he had no idea. So people don't shop around. But also, I think what we need to be doing is selling on customer satisfaction. And that's where the ratings come in and all of those
Yeah,
reviews.
yeah, yeah.
And I think where we put the consumer at the heart of the transaction, that's so much better. And unfortunately, it's something that we've avoided doing because of the worry of liability and trying to put all these disclaimers around it. And, we'll only tell them what we can tell them. And instead, we should be saying, now, look, these are the specialists that you need to speak to about all of these things. These are the things that I can talk to you about.
Mm.
And having Zoom calls or Teams calls with them. I mean, I used to meet all of my clients when I first started, and it just meant that they felt that, I was a human being and I was trying to help them, and that they, could ask me any question they liked. I mean, I had one, took 3 hours to go through it because we were trying to find the, the most auspicious date for completion. But anyway, parking that. But to enable them to ask the right questions. Now, of course, when you're charging tuppence halfpenny, you don't have time to be able to do that. And if a client comes in the door, you're trying to get them out because you've
Yeah,
got a million emails to respond
yeah,
to.
yeah,
But if you use some of the other products that are out there, like View My Chain, you can identify of all of those emails which ones are in chains that are complete and that you should prioritize, because they're the ones you're going to be getting the phone calls on. So even if you won't charge more, use technology to help you do things easier. And
yeah.
what was really interesting at the CLC roadshow that we did the other day, roundtable rather, was that one of the committee from the Law Society was there, and somebody was talking about, well, why is it that you want to be leaving all this stuff until a buyer is found? You said, well, it's our job to go and get all of the information and to chase up things. And it's like, well, not really. I qualified as a conveyancer to advise clients. I didn't qualify as a conveyancer to be chased and chase up searches. And the landmark survey showed that conveyancers felt that 55% of their time was spent chasing or being chased. So if we've got all of that information available in a digital property logbook that we can just dip into, and if that can update in real time, what a difference that would make. I, as a
It'd be a
conveyancer, can
phenomenal
give
difference.
proper
Yeah, yeah.
advice.
Yeah, I think it'd be a phenomenal difference. I think that it comes to all the chasing, I firmly believe, is down to a lack of trust and confidence that the work is getting done. And I know, having sat in so many conveyancers' offices, that they are so desperate to do the work, they can't do the work until the doors are shut and the phones are switched off, which is invariably after 5 or 6 o'clock at night. We get orders in at 1 a.m, Saturdays, Sundays. Estate agents think they're shut, but they're actually doing the work. And business open, calls from estate agents, chasing. They're not getting any work done. And it's just this awful spiral. I remember working with a conveyancer, Dawn, that I trusted. I knew the brand, I knew how she worked. We went down the pub every Friday night. We talked about what was going on. We put the world to rights, and I left her alone Monday to Friday. She got the job done because I knew I could trust her, and she could update her clients because I gave her the time to do it. But so many conveyancers are being shouted at. What's going on? It's none of your business. Leave me to speak to the client and I'll update them. But all the while I'm having to fend off your noise, I can't do my job. And
Yeah,
I
but
just
then
don't understand when the penny's going to drop.
no, but then again, why aren't they using things like View My Chain? Or, I mean, there are others.
Yeah, there
I
are.
think
Yeah.
Koji are doing now as well, where you can see what's happening in the whole of the chain. And MoveMe is the product that they use, so that, and when they do that, the transactions fall through so much less because the consumer knows who's doing what when. They can see progress being made, and so they're happy to hold on. Whereas I've had people ring me up and say, I'm going to pull out unless we exchange contracts this week. And we're like, why? Well, I'm fed up waiting. No, what you're saying is you're trying to take back control. Your life doesn't feel in control at the moment, and the reality is this is just a blip. The moment you move in, and 3 months after you move, you won't even remember any of the pain.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
the conveyancer, it needs to be able, just like Dawn was able with you, to know that she could ring you up if she needed you to help, and you'd run like a headless chicken trying to resolve it. But otherwise,
Leave her
you
alone.
knew that
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
could trust her to just crack on with
But
it.
she was also the sort of person that in this day and age, she would be very receptive to actually saying, not putting up with a crap case management system. She'd be going, okay, what can I do to free up my life to get the job done? And it would be to look at a case management system that has a client portal, that has an introducer portal, that does all the onboarding, that does all the ID, has integrated with our land reg, enables people to see what's going on, have lifetime chats, and actually deal with a paperless environment and have things scanned to go straight into case. All these wonderful things. And Legal CM, our case management system, does all of that because we went into a dark room and went, what does everybody want? But we can't sell case management systems for toffee. Why? Because it's a nightmare to change.
But the worst thing is that with AI now, I was at a conference the other week and they were saying that they were taking AI from just words to actions. So they were taking it from a large language model, and instead they were getting it to identify what actions it needed to take. Now, that sounds terrifying, but the prompting that they gave it was so tight that it couldn't do anything outside the box. So if I just give you an example, it wasn't this one, but Kudu is a mortgage broker, and that is literally AI. They put it through CMAP3, which is the mortgage broker qualification. It got 78%. So they retrained it till it got 98%. And so it would take in sufficient information from the consumer to identify which lender would lend and on the property and their affordability. And then at the end of it, it said, do you want to go direct to a mortgage broker or the lender, or do you want a mortgage broker to help you? 50% still wanted a mortgage broker to do it for them. So it's not that AI is going to take away anybody's jobs. And 50%, by the way, is the standard norm at the moment anyway. But what it's going to do is ensure that you are supported in delivering your job. So AI now can do so much more of that automated work,
Absolutely brilliant.
just flagging up the important stuff.
Yeah.
But you don't get access to that unless you pay for it. And even just paying for ChatGPT, oh my word, the stuff that that can do once you pay for it. And you can get it to memorize what actions you have done previously so that it then can identify, where you're at now.
Yeah, I mean that's really exciting. I mean, you only need to speak to Peter Ambrose,
Yeah.
and his excitement about the stuff they're managing to do now with AI and the way in which they're improving their tech with the use of AI and building stuff that would have otherwise taken months, getting it done in days or weeks. It's just so brilliant. And of course, the way Legal Eto has been embraced with inquiry management is just phenomenal. And I love the fact that he's managed to get that product into the marketplace and have it so well received and adopted. I think it's a long way to go. There's a lot of firms that aren't using it, and a lot of firms that did use it or got very uppity and said it didn't do this, didn't do that. So they said, okay, fine, now it does. So get over it, get on with it. But it's great to see that things like that have no barriers to use have just come on board that have made a huge difference. I welcome it.
But you've got to treat it like a paralegal. So you've got to make sure it's properly trained.
Mm-hmm.
And you've got to do an appraisal of it on a regular basis as well, as you would do with a paralegal. And certainly, that seems to be where the regulators are sitting at the moment. Certainly CLC would say, yeah, you've got to prove that you've trained it properly and that it's doing everything right. But so long as you can do that, as you would do with a paralegal, then you're going to be okay.
Yeah.
And it is very much keeping abreast of stuff and understanding actually where we are seeing issues arising. So, it used to be talking about hallucinogens and stuff like that, and that it would be coming out with the wrong thing because it was hallucinating based on the other data. And that's where you sort of get your prompt pentagram to be able to identify and to restrict where it's able to look so that it is only looking at the law that is relevant to your transaction. Why do it yourself when you can pay a developer to do it, or you can pay AI to write its own prompts now these days?
Amazing. Things are moving so fast. Bethany, we have been gassing for 48 minutes, and I'm not sure anyone's. I'm sure they will sit through this, but it's just so we could go on for hours. So I'm not going to put anyone through any more pain to get to the bits they like. So I'm really grateful that you've taken some time out of your day to share what you're doing and your insights, and, your challenges, and things that you see happening in the future with the Conveyancer Insights audience. I'm really grateful for your time, Bethany. Thank you very much for joining me today.
Well, we've just got to get all of those things done that you're ranting about, just so that you can relax and retire. Maybe one day, maybe.
One day, yes.
Let's see who beats. We can have a competition. Who retires first?
I think that's a mental thing. I think it's who has the mental capacity to wish to stop, and I'm just not.
Well,
ready
that's
for
never
it
going to happen, is it?
It's never going to happen. So no, I'm sorry.
It's just too much goddamn fun.
I think it's just going to be simply down to who can stay healthiest the longest.
Yeah. Right. Well, I'm off for a run now.
Yeah, good. Yeah, I'm going to go and have that breakfast that I promised myself 5 hours ago and never had.
Make sure lots of protein.
Indeed. Right. There we go. I'm going to stop that. Thank you very much, Beth.
Lovely to see you.